All the cops get here, bro. Let's go then.
Maggot.
Stop for frail, do you even leave?
He removed his own GPS ankle bracelet, jumped in a creek, swam to the other side, and tried to steal a dinghy. But he didn't have the key. 2 years earlier, he'd stood next to his mother in a Queensland Police video telling teenagers not to become him. His name's Ben Geppert. Everyone on the Gold Coast knows him as Notorious, and this is the story of a man the police tried to turn into a warning who kept becoming the thing they were warning people about. Benjamin Mark Geppert grew up small for his age and, by his own account, got bullied for it at school. Somewhere between that and his early 20s, he found the Hells Angels, and later the Finks, and built himself into the opposite of the kid who used to get picked on. Heavily tattooed, a teardrop and the word vendetta inked on his face, an Instagram following that turns street brawls into content. By his mid-20s, he wasn't just a bikie, he was a bikie with an audience. That audience is what makes his story different from most in this series. Everything Geppert did, the fights, the feuds, the grief, the attempted redemption, happened partly in public, tagged and posted, watched by thousands of people who felt like they knew him. September 2019, Varsity Lakes on the Gold Coast. Geppert's younger brother, Harrison, 17 years old and, by every account, someone who idolized his older brother, is stabbed in the back in a local park. He's pronounced dead at the scene. An 18-year-old, Jarvis Farrier, later turns himself in and is charged with the murder. Geppert's response, posted publicly within days, doesn't read like grief alone. "You're still my blood," he wrote, "and I promise I won't rest until I have made this person pay." Hundreds turned up to Harrison's funeral at St. Monica's Catholic Church in Tugun, dressed in red, his favourite colour. Out of that loss, something else happened. Geppert reconciled with his family. He and his mother Lisa agreed to appear together in a Queensland Police Service video, part of an official campaign to talk young men out of joining outlaw motorcycle gangs before it was too late. In it, Geppert talks about the bullying, about how gang life had ruined things, about the stigma that follows a face covered in tattoos everywhere you go looking for honest work. It looked for a while like the turning point. Here's the detail that unravels the redemption story almost as soon as it's told. The Queensland Police exit program videos were eventually pulled down and put under review, not because of anything Geppert himself did on camera, but because another man featured in the same documentary series was later alleged to have committed a string of domestic violence offences, all after the footage was shot but before it was ever released. And Geppert's own case ran on a parallel track. He was committed to stand trial on serious charges, the ones that would eventually send him back to prison for offending that had happened after that same video was filmed. The police campaign that put him forward as proof a bikie could walk away was already, quietly, being overtaken by events on the ground. By 2020, Geppert was 26 and famous for reasons that had nothing to do with police campaigns. Footage from a Robina car park went viral. Geppert and another man throwing wild, mostly missing punches outside a KFC in broad daylight, his girlfriend filming and cheering him on. Social media had a field day with how few of the swings actually connected. Geppert later gave his own account of what led to it on a podcast hosted by Nomad's president Moody Tajur. He said the other man, who he claimed was a Mongols motorcycle club president at the time, had been taunting him online for weeks, even turning up outside his house to call him out. "I swear I've got a target on my back," Geppert said. "Some cut's tattooed it on me." When his girlfriend spotted the rival standing in the KFC car park as they drove past, she told him to get out and have a crack. Kids and families were around. He went anyway. It's the kind of story that sounds almost comic in the retelling, until you remember it happened in a public car park, in daylight, with children nearby, between two men connected to organisations known for considerably more serious violence than a scuffle over stolen chips. Then, later that same year, it stopped being comic. In September 2020, Geppert went to a home invasion at Broadbeach Waters and attacked a 26-year-old man with a baseball bat. The man wasn't a stranger. He was someone Geppert had been friends with, until Geppert sold him $1,500 worth of methamphetamine the month before, and the debt hadn't been settled. When the case reached Southport District Court in August 2021, Geppert's lawyer painted the arc for the judge directly. A young man who'd fallen into an association with people described as bikies at 23, whose life had spiraled further out of control after his brother's murder, who by 2020 was using any drug that he could get his hands on. His barrister put it plainly: the behavior was tied to the drug use and to the people he was surrounded by. The court also heard something that complicates the simple version of Bikie gets what he deserves. Because Geppert had become an Instagram-famous figure, he had, in his lawyer's words, a target on his back inside prison itself, unable to leave his unit without becoming the subject of threats from other inmates. 3 years jail. Eligible for parole later that year, given the court found continued custody wasn't actually helping him rehabilitate. He was released in December 2022. He didn't make it 2 months. January 2023. Geppert was on parole, living at a Varsity Lakes home, when he cut his own GPS tracking bracelet off his ankle and disappeared. Police issued a warrant. For 2 days he stayed ahead of them. The anklet itself never moved from the house, its signal sitting there the whole time, telling detectives nothing about where he actually was. On 17 January, police spotted him on Awunga Avenue in Burleigh Heads. He ran. He plunged straight into Tallebudgera Creek, swam across to the far bank, and made for a dinghy moored there, a genuine attempt at a getaway by water. It failed for the simplest possible reason. The boat needed a key to start, and he didn't have one. He climbed back out, ran on foot, and was picked up later that same day during a routine traffic stop. When the case reached Southport Magistrates Court in March 2023, Geppert pleaded guilty to attempted unlawful use of a vessel, being unlawfully at large and unlawfully removing corrective services property. His lawyer told the court his client had been doing the best he'd ever done up to that point, and then had, in the barrister's own words, a brain snap. He has no idea why. The court heard Geppert and his partner had a 7-month-old daughter and a second baby on the way, and that he was hoping to be released in time for the birth. He'd already spent 52 days in custody by the time of sentencing. He was handed a suspended sentence. The exact term isn't confirmed across the sources examined here, with any release remaining subject to a decision from the parole board. Sit with the shape of that decision for a second. A man swims a creek and tries to steal a boat to escape police, and the outcome is a suspended sentence rather than fresh time behind bars. Whatever you think about that call, it's a genuinely different kind of leniency to the one his brother's killer or the man he hit with a baseball bat ever received from anyone. Here's the tension that sits underneath every part of Ben Geppert's file, and it doesn't resolve neatly no matter which direction you push it. This is a man who lost a 17-year-old brother to a knife in a park, who stood publicly with his own mother asking other young men not to end up where he'd ended up, and who then went on to sell drugs to a friend, beat him with a baseball bat over the debt, and later cut off a court-ordered tracking device rather than face the consequences of breaking parole. Both things happened. The grief was real, the funeral, the Instagram post, the promise of vengeance, none of that reads like performance. And the offending kept happening anyway, sometimes within months of the moments where he looked, publicly, like he'd turned a corner. The first question worth asking is about the exit program itself. Queensland Police put Geppert forward as a face of walking away from gang life and had to quietly wind that campaign back after its own subjects kept reoffending. When a police-run rehabilitation message becomes a case study in how hard rehabilitation actually is, does that undercut the message? Or is it the most honest advertisement the program could have produced, whether police intended it or not? The second question is about the tattoos. Geppert has said publicly, more than once, that his face, the teardrop, the word vendetta, makes it nearly impossible to walk into a job interview and be taken seriously. There's real truth in that. Employers do judge on sight. But it's also true that everything permanently written on his skin was a choice he made, at a time when he was actively building the reputation that later made honest work harder to find. Is that stigma, or is it consequence catching up in a form he can't take off? What actually happened at Tallebudgera Creek in January 2023 wasn't really about a boat, or a stolen key, or even about breaching parole. It was about a man on the very edge of a life he kept describing, publicly, as something he wanted out of. Choosing, in the moment it mattered most, to run rather than face it. The dinghy was never really the escape plan. The GPS bracelet coming off was. Everything after that was improvisation. There's a version of this story where Ben Geppert is simply a cautionary tale, proof that a tattooed face and a violent history don't disappear because a camera crew filmed you saying the right things once. There's another version where he's still, right now, the same kid who got bullied at school and never quite found his way to anywhere safer than the reputation that followed. Both of those readings sit in the same public record. Neither one cancels the other out. What do you reckon? When someone stands up publicly and says they've left that life behind and then keeps returning to exactly the same patterns, is that proof the system failed him, or proof of how genuinely hard it is to walk away from something that's already become your whole identity?